Terror gets etched into your soul. Here's your look at the new NECA Toys SDCC 2019 exclusive, the Etched Pennywise the Clown. NECA presents a very special edition of Pennywise based on the Derry Charter engraving. The terrifying clown has been around for centuries, as evidenced by his appearance in an engraving of the Derry Town Charter. So, let's get this review underway. Sounds good to everybody? Sounds good, yeah? Okay. Taking the tape measure right to the very top of his head, and we're going to get the measurements for the Etched Pennywise. I want to also send out a big thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys for sending this my way. The version of Pennywise, I'm going to refrain from using the word etched throughout this entire review, but the figure stands 7.4 inches in height. Probably sounds a little familiar to you. We're going to switch that over to centimeters post-haste, and almost 19 centimeters tall. He's 18.9 centimeters to be exact. If the height of the figure sounds familiar, I don't know, maybe you remember that number off the top of your head. It so happens that it's because the figure is, yes, an exact model re-release to the one that we had gotten initially, and really all the subsequent releases of Pennywise from NECA Toys have basically utilized the exact same mold. Spider legs and stuff like that have been changed out on some of the releases, but still the core, the main body of the figure has pretty much stayed relatively the same. In the etched version, it's no different, other than, of course, now they've gone different direction, giving us this really neat kind of etched effect. We'll get closer looks at the figure now. Reckon before we do that, though, you just say reckon. First thing we're going to have a look at is the accessories that come included with the figure. He comes with two variations of his trademark calling card, the red balloon. One is pretty much a carryover, just a simple repack of the original red balloon that we had gotten with one of the previous Pennywises in the past. Then, on this end, on this side, you've got the same, essentially the same balloon, just done in a gray treatment. This gray scale does really look quite nice and works very well with this particular rendition of Pennywise. You can see how the cross-hatching of panel lines have been done to the balloon, just to kind of give it like the look that it's been etched. Really, really neat. The placement of the wires are exactly the same, so they're a little bit further back beyond the point of the knot of the balloon. I also can't help but notice I've got like a little bit of what I believe to be just paint. Probably could have just flicked that off before the beginning of this review, but it was a surprise to me certainly as well. But like I said, the balloons themselves are pretty much identical to one another. Yes, coloring for any astute viewer will notice that the coloring is different, but basically other than that, like the mold is exactly the same. Of course, Pennywise is not going to be able to do holding much unless he had the proper hands. Oh, coincidentally enough, that sounds like a segue then to the supplied hand. Almost had that balloon rolling away on me. The supplied hand is the same hand also that we've gotten ourselves with the previous Pennywise clowns. It's simply just a case, there's a little hole in the hand portion, kind of between the thumb and the pointer, and you have to take the balloon and just kind of wiggle it through it. This can always be the first time, when you first do this, it can always be just a difficult feat. What I would encourage, though, as I've heard from some viewers, that they actually doweled out, just kind of made that hole a little bit bigger. I would probably refrain from doing that myself. Instead, I would go the route of just twisting the hand over top of the wire. Believe you me, it'll work and it'll go through, and then you'll get a much tighter fit. I would certainly not be saying take a knife or anything like that to it, because, you know, you make the hole too big, he simply just won't hold the balloon. So it does come with that hand. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time doweling our way through the whole of the hand, because simply the end result is going to be the exact same thing as what we saw with the other Pennywise the Clowns. So we're just going to move those balloons out of the way. Again, these are wireframes, so you can manipulate and bend them. Don't bend them too much, or they're not going to look like naturally dropping strings. They're going to look like bent wires. You certainly don't want that. The other thing he comes included with is an interchangeable head. I guess it probably helps to show you what the other head looks like so you can get a good proper feel for what exactly is the difference between the two. One is a smiling head, one is a more neutral, stern looking head. I love the look of that head sculpt. And if this one does look familiar to you, I only have actually pulled out one of my Pennywise the Clowns, but it just so happens to be the one that I pulled looks to be sharing the same mold as the one that we got here in the etched version. Simply just done in a grayscale and just popping in that additional coloring with the black. It goes to show actually just how gray and black can go a long way. How much this head sculpt, this portrait, does stick out a lot more detail-wise to this one right here, even though this one has a lot more color going for it. As you can see, though, it seems to be the exact same head sculpt. I can't imagine that anything has really been changed between the two. You can see it's exactly the same to one another. We'll just move that back to the side. And again, like looking at the two head portraits, I'm just going to tilt the head up slightly. You can see how they work very well. Either one of them equally, I mean, work just as well. I kind of like the smiling on this one, although there's something to be said for just that stare, just looking right at you, piercing through your soul. Anyways, one thing I did notice about this particular figure, though, is while he does have pretty much gray tones through the majority of the mold from head to toe, his neck does seem like it's a little too light. Now, I thought it was too white, too light, but then I noticed that his gloves are also a light shade. This could also lend why this coloring is so light in the neck. At least if the gloves are the same color, I would imagine it's probably intentional. To swap out the heads, by the way, it was simply just a case of pulling that off of the ball joint. It's not even so much a ball joint anymore. NECA has now utilized these more cylinder posts, which I find is a lot easier to change out the heads than trying to fight with a big bulbous ball joint. Instead, you just take out the head that you want to remove, at least, replace it with the head that you want to replace it with, and now you've got the swapped out head. As simple as that. A distraction, perhaps, at the hands of this magician. You were too busy listening to my voice. You didn't even notice that I pulled the head off and replaced it with this other one here. A sleight of hand, if you will. No sleight of hand. You guys are very smart and observant. So, like, again, like looking at the two head portraits, really liking these, I must admit. The cracks and all the recessed details that the other Pennywise the Clown was still possessing, like this one isn't really that different at all, miraculously pops so much more when you do it with the gray treatment. When you start adding these darker etched lines, literally, they're just etched lines of black, boy oh boy does this figure's head portrait stand out. And equally so, and again, if you want to use either one of them, this one also does a great job of standing out. I always like to bring as close as I possibly can these head sculpts to the camera so you guys can see just the amount of detail that NECA puts into all of their pieces. This one I like too because, like I said, that black really does show up, especially on the black nose where there's a bit of a sheen to the nose too. When you are moving in certain directions, certain angles of light are bouncing off of it. And boy, oh boy, does it ever stand out. The same thing for his lips. Oh, I love this figure. I mean, really, again, many people have said certainly that NECA has delved into, dipped themselves back into the pool of using molds again and again. But, you know, in cases like this, I'm more than happy to the idea of getting another Pennywise if it's a little bit different than the previous one that we had gotten. I think this sums up to be about 5 now Pennywises, if I'm not mistaken. We've got the original one, the GameStop one, the Well House one, trying to think of the other ones that were available, the Spider Legs version, and I guess this one here would make 5. Do correct me if I'm missing out on one of them. But this one does work well for really ideally being just simple repaint. it goes to show that taking repainted molds, you can do something a little bit different, a little bit drastically different from it. Even though this scene really wasn't in the movie for very long at all, that etched version of Pennywise showing up on the town charter was enough for NECA to kind of consider, you know, for an SDCC, seeing as we've really kind of delved into every single Pennywise that there possibly could be, why not actually delve into different ways that he's presented in the film? And again, I really like that. Another thing that they could certainly entertain the idea of doing, speaking of going back to the well house, is maybe the idea of doing the film reel version of Pennywise, which is basically would just be this figure. And if they could find some way to paint it so it's looking like the degraded film reel, I think that would be really fun also as well. As for the rest of his body, because we're spending so much time talking about his head, I'm getting sort of lost in his stare and the sculpt of this figure. But like looking at the rest of the figure, yes, there is pretty much just the exact same things, the same aspects to this figure as this one right here. You will admit, though, I would certainly hope to admit, that just that extra bit of shading, all the ruffles and all the wrinkles and all the other creases to his outfit certainly stand out. I'm especially like focusing my efforts looking at the ruffled sleeves here. Something about doing them in this gray scale with the black. Boy, oh boy, does that ever pop on this particular figure. And like I said, there's nothing really different between the two figures. So if you're trying to source out finding the differences between the two, one of these others is not like the other. Was that Sesame Street song? Ideally, though, you could be singing that song all you want, but it does seem like they are the exact same figure to one another. Something also I noticed, too, about this figure, too, is a noticeable shade happening on this one side. You notice it a little bit more when you turn the figure around, how there's a darker wash on this side than on this side right here. I like that it does have a distinct shade. There's light hitting on this side, for example, and shade happening, of course, on the opposite side. But I like that. I like that two-tone effect. It's not very stark, like you don't see a big, bold, black line of shade and a light, bold line of light. I like that it's gradually kind of migrating its way across the body of the figure. And that kind of carries its way all the way down the figure as well. It seems like it is a little bit more shaded on the one side, a little lighter on the other side. There's the bottom of his feet and the ruffles of the bottoms of his pants. And again, there's something to be said about this. This figure really very much reminds me of the black and white Freddy Krueger, which so happened also to be, I don't know if it was a San Diego Comic-Con, but it was certainly a convention exclusive that had the little skateboard with it. And he certainly was done in that same grayscale, if not almost identical grayscale to this to this Pennywise. Of course, the patterns would be a little bit different, but the colorings, especially like in the feet, I'm noticing that the colors seem very similar and very familiar to the one that we had gotten with Freddy Krueger. On the other feet, like the original figure, he does have peg holes, so displaying the figure shouldn't be a problem. Although this Pennywise has never really had any problems standing, but if you want to get him in a little bit more dynamic of a pose, you could certainly utilize those peg holes on the undersides of his feet. Let's run through the figure's articulation. His head rotates all the way around, depending on whatever figure head portrait you go with. Hinges up and down, and also rocks back and forth. It seems very apparent as well that he has a secondary ball joint at the base of the neck. You can almost even see it. There you can see it right there when I lift up the collar. He's got a secondary ball joint happening right there, so it does allow for a little bit more of a pivot down. You can kind of get that really neat, menacing stare from Pennywise. Love that. The shoulders hinge outwards, and you can also most definitely rotate the arms all the way around. He does have a double hinge on the elbow, although I do find this arm is a little on the tight side. It just takes a little bit of, if you find yourself struggling with the idea of bending elbows, joints on these figures, might I, if I can, this humbled reviewer would like to throw out the suggestion of just submerging that arm into hot water just to kind of soften up that joint. Believe you me, you'll be doing a service for yourself and for the figure, because you won't be yelling at the figure after the fact because you did break the joint. So if it does seem a little stiff, just use a little bit of TLC and certainly a lot of hot water. the arms rotate, there is actually a distinct cut in which the lower portion of the forearm does rotate all the way around. And then also his hands rotate also all the way around as well. Upper torso does have a ball joint. You can move that all the way around too. All the way around technically if you wanted to, just to show you. The skirt, like the other, the bottom ruffled section of his top of his costume is soft plastic, just like the original. So it does afford that the legs can then hinge outward. You can move them forward and back. He has a swivel at the top cut of the thigh, basically where it's attaching to the ball joint. He does have a double hinge on the knee. Again, I find like a lot of these SDCC figures have really tight joints, despite for the fact that Pennywise really has been utilizing the exact same mold all this time. I can safely say that the joints still seem really tight on the figure, so that's always a good thing. Feet rotate back and forth. There's that ankle pivot, and you can also hinge the feet back and forth, up and down, I should say. And this figure does not have any sort of posable toes. Why you would need posable toes, I don't know. I don't know this. I wouldn't say this figure is in the same category as an athletic ninja style figure where you would want to get him in dynamic poses. Even if you have him as in a vanilla pose is what I've got him right now, he still commands quite the presence. And I think a lot of that can be chalked up to the fact that they did go the route of giving him a gray scale, giving him the route of those kind of little etched black lines, very bold lines on the one side of the figure. Overall, I think it's a very successful figure, despite for the fact that he is utilizing the same molds as the previous Pennywise that we've looked at before. Seeing as I was afforded a little bit more time, I had that time to eventually be able to get the wire into Pennywise's finger-gripped hand. It's effective and it does look good, even though we've seen this look before with a fully colorized Pennywise. Speaking of which, the figure also does come with the red balloon that we had already discussed. I kind of like, though, I dig the notion of displaying him completely in this grayscale treatment. The darker tones is really what makes this figure pop, and having those little etched lines also on the balloon, I think just overall finishes off the package rather nicely. NECA Toys aren't strangers to the idea, of course, releasing mold after mold, pretty much the exact same figure, just giving it a different coat of paint. NECA really have perfected it, and I think for NECA Toys to release like an etched version of the Charter Pennywise is a creative way, again, of utilizing the exact same mold. Speaking of utilizing also the exact same mold, an idea that I had thrown out in this review, if they're going to reuse the mold yet again, it'd be neat to see what they could kind of do with the slideshow scene, in which the slide projector is rotating through the various different slides, and you can start seeing Pennywise start to form. Granted, yes, we did get a lot of those head portraits with the Wellhouse version of Pennywise, but it would be interesting to see what NECA Toys could do in almost like a film reel, where you've got like the degraded footage in the slide. If they could find some creative way, as they've certainly done it with the video game figures, giving it like a cell shaded, if they could find a neat way of doing that with a Wellhouse version of Pennywise, then I would definitely be sold on picking that one up as well. As I said, this was an SDCC 2019 exclusive. The beauty of it, I suppose, is being that it wasn't mass circulated to retail stores. If you aren't so much down with the idea of the grayscale version of Pennywise, you're not necessarily missing out on anything. Although, I do think, and hopefully in this review, pointed out that there are merits to the idea that they went this direction, giving us something very different, very drastic, and yet very cool all the same. If you managed to pick up this one for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section what you think of Etched Pennywise, or based on this review and this review alone, let me know what you think of the figure. We're going to have a look at some other SDCC 2019 exclusives in upcoming reviews, so if that is your fancy and maybe didn't get a chance like I didn't get a chance to attend the con this year, hopefully these reviews will help by showing you some of the things that you could have picked up, or really still could pick up, even though Comic-Con has wrapped up for the year. Also, if you're new to this channel or long-time viewers and never got around to doing it, make sure you turn on the bell notifications. And before you do that, make sure you turn on and switch the subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel in a nutshell and turn on the bell notifications. Also stay tuned because we're going to have a whole bunch of new videos coming your way. And in case, just in case, you're asking yourself, this guy seems to be posting a lot of content. What if I missed something? That is a good question, astute viewer. What you can also do is swing on over to the homepage, check out the videos in the videos section there, just kind of scroll down, see if there's something you may have missed along the way. Like I said, I do a lot of content on a very much regular basis. So there is probably a good chance you may have missed out on something. The best way to guarantee that is the bell notification, yes, but also swinging over to the home page. Most definitely yes, and you can see all the stuff that I've done up to this point. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.